Hi, welcome to my blog. My name is Tom Shue. Today we're going to be doing another Lightroom tutorial. And in this tutorial we're going to talk about the Develop module, and particularly the Develop module in Lightroom 4. If you look at this graphic here, you'll see that in Lightroom 3 the sliders used to be exposure, recovery, fill light, blacks, brightness, and contrast. Well, now they've removed recovery, fill lights, and brightness and put in highlights, shadows, and whites. They've done that for a couple reasons, because it gives you more control than before, and I'll show you what I mean. If I try to explain to you what these sliders do on this particular image, it'd be real difficult to get a grasp of how these sliders actually function. So what I've done is I've created this graphic. So it's solid black on the left, it's 100% white on the right, and there's a gradient in between. So if you look at this exposure slider, what it will do is it will decrease or increase exposure. But how do you know where you're really at? Where is white in this particular image? Now that I've adjusted this slider to the left, is white over here or is white over here? Well, there's a trick you can do, and you can create a clipping mask by just holding down the Alt key and clicking this slider. You see that transition there, that line between white and black? Well, that's the exact point where white is. All the way up to that line is 100% white, and as I increase exposure, that white point moves to the left. That's important to know because this lets us know where we can set a white point in our image. The whole idea of making a fine art print or a good quality print is that we have a white point and we have a black point, so the range or the dynamic range of the image is all in one picture. You increase that range by setting a white point and setting a black point. It doesn't have to be, these huge black points or huge white points. However, it's a good idea to try to keep both if you can in your image. So we'll double click this exposure slider and bring it back to the center. And if we look at this highlight slider, well, before we go into the highlight slider, let's go to the black slider. The black slider is kind of the opposite of exposure. If we hold down the Alt key and we slide it down, you'll see that that black point is the position, and that transition between the white and the black is right where that line is. But holding down the Alt key will help us define where our black point is. And on this graphic it's a white line, but on an image you'll be able to tell what is black in your picture, so you can set a black point. So you're probably wondering what the rest of these sliders do, and I'll show you. So if we grab this highlight slider and we move it to the right, that's going to increase our highlights, and if we move it to the left, it'll decrease the highlights. If we double click here, that will reset it. And if we grab our white slider and we move it to the right, it's going to increase whites, and we move it to the left, it's going to decrease whites. So it looks about the exact same as the highlight slider, but it really isn't. So I'm going to reset our history here just so we can get a clear look of what's happening. I'm going to move our highlights all the way to 100. I'm going to reset it. I'm going to move our whites all the way to 100, and I'm going to reset it. So we're going to pull down our history, and we're going to look at our white clipping point at 100%. You'll see that the white point moves over, and you want to note that when you're dealing with these sliders, the highlights or the whites don't affect black at all. Black always remains constant. However, watch what happens to the middle detail in the image, the mid-range detail. So we go to the highlights and we click on it at 100%. You'll see that that center detail, that highlight detail in the mid-range of the image, it's protected. Whereas with the white slider, it's not protected. Okay, so the highlight slider is your detail control in your image on your highlight side. So you're probably asking, what's the shadows do? So we'll close that down, and if we look at the blacks, if we slide the blacks all the way over to -100, you'll see that black point increases, and we'll double click and bring it back, and we'll bring the shadow slider over, and again it looks like it's doing the same thing as the black slider, but again it's not. So let's look at our shadow detail again at 100% on the negative. You'll see that the black point rises up and the whites are not affected. And if we go to the black clipping, I'm sorry, the mid-range detail is not affected on the shadow slider, where if we go to the black slider, black clipping at -100, you'll see that it doesn't protect that detail in the mid-range of that slider. So again, we'll go to the shadows and you'll see that it does increase the black point, but it doesn't affect the detail in the image. So -100. You see how that mid-range detail is protected? So here it is, the highlight slider protects the detail on the highlight side, and the shadow protects the detail on the shadow side. This is the difference. So now if we're armed with this information, we can make any adjustments we want in our image without having to worry about where we're at, because we know what's going on. So let's look back at that hand image. If I click Alt and I reset this tone detail, this is the actual picture from the beginning. So this isn't anything that there's a science to. It's all subjective to what you want as far as your final image is concerned. But this is how I would start my workflow, is I would come in and I hold the Alt key and I would set a white point. So I'll bring the slider over just until we see clipping in the highlight area. You see we're starting to see pixels. I'll be dramatic so you can see. All of that information is clipped. It's completely white. We don't want it to be completely white. However, we do want to bring a white point into the image. There is no clipping at all, and there's a little bit of clipping now right there. I'll just back it off just a little bit till it's not clipped. So now we've set our white point. Okay, we're right at the edge of white, and there's no loss in detail because there's no clipping. Now it doesn't look so great, and we'll get to that in just a minute, but I know that all the detail information is there because if you look at the histogram, there's nothing clipped, and we just looked at the mask and there's nothing clipped. So if we bring our highlight slider down to the left, you'll see that it starts to bring that detail back in the hand on the edges and stuff. So we'll just bring that there for a second, and now we're going to set a black point. So if we hold down the Alt key and we slide this to the left until we start to get a black point, you can start to see those pixels again. I'll exaggerate. You'll see that all those pixels are black. So I'll bring this back up till they disappear, and then I'll just bring it down just a little bit to add in some black information into the scene. So we've got some blacks in here, and now you can start to see that there's some defined detail between the highlights and the shadows. So we'll go into the shadow slider, and this is where the subjective part comes. We'll bring this shadow slider down until we've set enough information or detail into the image that we like. Okay, and I can do the same thing with my whites, is I can bring this down a little bit until the amount of detail that I see in the image is what I like, and I think somewhere around this area is good. So now I have a full range of color. Let me rephrase this. I have a full range of information from white to black and all the detail in between. I know it for a fact because I'm not clipping anything. I am clipping a little bit of the blacks because I did set a black point, but all of the highlight information is there. So if we wanted to redo all that and we didn't like it, you hold down the Alt key and click reset, and there's the image we started with. Control Z. This is a developed image, and I like it better if we threw a little vignette on it, make it pop from the edges, keep your eyes from wandering off the frame. We'll go here to effects, and we'll bring this vignette on there, kind of like a 4-corner burn. I'll feather it about this much. Maybe I'll come up with a little bit of that, protect some of those highlights. And there you go. There's how I would develop an image using those detail sliders. So, sorry for the long video. It's about 3 o'clock in the morning in Las Vegas, but I wanted to get something up for you guys tomorrow morning. So, thanks for watching.